So there's a couple things I want to go over before we start the video. And number one is that I'm not a mechanic. I've done a couple of CarPlay installs for a friend and a cousin of mine, but this is my first time doing like something as in-depth as this. So I'm gonna go step by step with you, and if you're not the mechanic type either, you should have no problem. Just follow my steps. I'd recommend watching a step before you go into action. Sometimes there's things that I did wrong and went back and later corrected. So watch the video in order and you should be good to go. I'm not some sort of pro, and that's the whole point of this video, is to teach anybody how to install this radio. Number two is that I am not a YouTuber, so some of the shots are going to be super shaky. Some of the lighting is going to be bad, but overall, the point of this video is to help you guys install your radio. So if you're looking for a video with specific key details on where stuff plugs in, how I routed wires, how to remove trim, all of that's included in this video, but it might not be the most professional looking thing you've ever seen. Third and finally is that this is a partnership video with CarTrimHome. So they sent me this C12 unit for the Tundra install for this video specifically. That being said, any opinions that I express about the unit are my own. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into the install. It's gonna be a long video, so if you're looking for just a part of it, I'll have YouTube chapters set up, so use those to skip to just the electronics or the trim or whatever you're looking for. And aside from that, enjoy the video. I went ahead and unboxed the package, and this is everything that came inside. We've got the unit itself and the plastic that's going to be mounted underneath. The directions say to verify that you've received all the parts that are supposed to be included, so we'll run through those now. We've got the 4G antenna, the 4-pin USB cable harness, the 6-pin USB cable harness, the canvas. This is a 4G slot / RCA harness. We've got the reversing camera wiring harness, OEM USB harness to preserve the OEM USB connection, the GPS module, power cord, I'll call that power cord number 2, another OEM USB harness. This is the camera setup that comes with this unit exclusively. The camera looks a little different than most backup or front cameras. I think we're going to be mounting it with this little sticky pad. And they also included a couple extra things that I ordered. One is this front and rear camera switch. I don't know if we're going to get to that in this install, but we'll see. I think this is the power button for the unit. We will find out as we're installing. We've got a bag of spacers. We'll see where those come in. They gave plenty of pry tools, so those will be good because I know we're going to be taking a lot of stuff apart inside the dash. They do not include this, but you will need an 8 and a 10 millimeter socket. So get those ready for the install. And then I had also ordered a separate camera, and I'm going to use this as my backup camera. I believe they have it listed on the site as a 4Runner backup camera, but it's going to work just fine for this install. So that's everything that comes in the package. Now let's hop inside the truck and get to it. First step we're going to do is actually just disconnect the battery. And the reason we're going to do that is because we are going to be removing an airbag, and we're just going to be messing with plenty of electronics. So I figure it's safer to have that removed. That way we don't encounter any unexpected issues. First step inside the truck is going to be this bottom middle panel. You're just going to use some of your orange pry tools, and it's got a seam right on the top that you can pry in between. And as soon as you kind of get that open a little bit, it should be easy to pull that out. I did end up taking my shift knob off just to make a little bit of extra room. Next step is going to be to remove these wires. This black one's got a little push tab on it, and then the 2 cigarette car charger ports just pull right off. All right, next thing coming off is the panel with the AC controls. This one's super easy. Literally just a small tug takes that off. It's only got one connector back here, so just go ahead and pinch that tab, pull that out, and then we're done there. Okay, so now that that's out, there's a couple of bolts we've got to get out of here. There's 1, 2 at the front, and then there's 2 hidden in the back. All 4 of those got to come out, and you're going to use your 10 millimeter socket to do that. once you get them kind of loose, they come out finger tight, so that way you don't drop them. And then I think for those back ones, I'm going to need a longer extension, so let me go check the garage and see what I've got. Okay, so I don't own any long extensions, but I just stacked 2 of them together. And that should be long enough to get back there and get those out. Yep. Kind of just sitting there. So hopefully that's okay. And then that one, I'm fairly sure I have it loosened up. So we're gonna go ahead and try to pull this unit out now. Okay, and so we're just gonna tug on the bottom of this and try to come up and out. Sure enough, those bolts kind of rocketed out. I did yank a little hard there. Let's make sure we've got 3 here. Where's my last one? You don't want to lose bolts for the time you reinstall. Okay, I'm just gonna assume it's sitting back there somewhere and we will get it in a second. Here's just me showing off what the original wires looked like at the back of the OEM radio. And this is just for my reference, or if you ever need to come back and reference this for some reason, here's a full look. Okay, so now that we've got the head unit out, all we need to do is disconnect these plugs. Most of them have this kind of tab where you just depress it. Just hold this plug firmly as you remove it so that you don't damage any of these wires. But we're gonna go ahead and disconnect all of those now. All right, so we're coming back. I was having a little trouble with this one. I'm working outside and it's cold today, so my fingers are having just a tough time gripping it. But yeah, little pliers help to depress that little tab, so no problem there. Okay, so that's all of them. Okay, next up, we're gonna pry off 2 more panels. This side one here and your vent panel. And we're gonna start with this side one. This one comes off super easy. Just get your pry under there. It comes off just like that. And then we're gonna start working under here under this. They give you a lot of pry tools, so don't be afraid to use multiple. I am certainly not a professional on this, but as far as I can tell, everything's just held together by clips. So it's just a matter of kind of getting it in that position where it's ready to pop off and then popping it off. All right, next up is going to be this trim piece here that's going to come off. I'm going to start from the back. So your pry tool under there. And same thing as the rest. It's just held on with clips, so it's just a matter of kind of getting it started. And carefully removing. Next up is going to be this piece of trim here, and it's held on by a little thumb screw. So just go ahead and unscrew that. So I'm just going to unscrew that. Just a little plastic bit there. We will save it. And then I'm just going to put my fingers behind that panel and tug. Sometimes with these panels, it's like a matter of finding where you need to put force. This one actually lost a clip, so I'm not sure where that came from. We will hold on to it for later. So this next clip is in full hyperspeed mode, and that's because I missed a step and I'm rushing to show you guys what it is before we carry on. And so there's actually this little tab on the left side that I had missed. And so you need to pry that open first before you take off this trim that's surrounding the airbag. So don't do what I did and just pull, pull, pull. You gotta do it in order. Okay, after a little bit of troubleshooting, I found out you actually need to pry here first. So go ahead and get your pry tool. Go up into there. That comes out real easily. We've got a screw we got to take off. So I'm gonna go ahead and take out that screw now. We'll get a screwdriver. Okay, so let's get in there with the screwdriver. The bolt that caused all our troubles. Cool, so we'll set that aside and then we'll keep working at this panel. Yep. Much easier once you get that out. I gotta make sure there's nothing over here too. There sure is. There's a bolt sitting there. So let me get 10 mil. And we'll undo that. Okay. Now it comes right off. And there's nothing holding it back there. So we have successfully removed that trim piece. Okay, so next up is going to be this passenger airbag, knee airbag. You've got to remove that bolt and these two here. And before you do that, make sure your battery is disconnected. We did that step one at the beginning of this video, so should already be disconnected, but anytime you're messing with airbags especially, but I didn't even want to risk the electronics, so my battery's been disconnected. Make sure yours is done too. And then let's take out these bolts. Got our 10 millimeter. And there's our third bolt. We're gonna set those aside. Okay, so now at this point, your airbag is just sitting there on a couple of pins and a mounting bracket here at the bottom. So don't yank, but just kind of carefully guide it off of those pins. And then it is plugged in, so you'll have to remove this plug, which it's not your standard pinch one that we've been using, but it does have these little fasteners. All right, so we're going back into hyperspeed for this clip because I'm going to speed past all this. I was basically pulling at the wrong direction on this connector. I thought that it was going to go sideways, how most of them have been, but it actually goes straight out, like laterally from the airbag. So I didn't know that it was going to be doing that, and so I was pulling at the wrong clip until I finally figured it out right here. All right, so that was it, guys. That whole connector is going to come out of there. Used a little knife just to barely get under the corner there and pry it up, and then that whole plug just comes out and you're left with this. So let's carefully store this somewhere and we'll move on to the next step. All right, next step is going to be the glove box. We've got a few screws we got to take care of. We've got one in this corner, two there, and then the last one tucked up underneath on that right side. So let's get to it with those. I do end up missing another screw here on the bottom left, so you can see me pulling on it, and then here in a second I discover I missed a screw under this side, so I'm going to take out that screw now, and then we'll go ahead and yank this glove box out. One more small piece of trim right above the glove box here. grab it and flex from the bottom, and comes right out. Super easy. Okay, so at this point we're making pretty good progress. We've gutted out a lot of that trim that's going to be in the way of our actual install. And so we're going to be finished over here on the passenger side for a second. Let's go do some work on the driver's side. First thing we're going to do is hit this AC vent panel. Just get behind it with your wedge. Pops off real easy. And then next you're going to dig under here. Just pop down the switch panel. So sometimes you can see the tabs on the clips. If you can just give that a little push, it'll help. So that's out, and the reason we needed that out is just to get this out of the way. This little trim piece. Go ahead and pull that off. Okay, next part is going to be just above the steering wheel, some liner here. And it doesn't need to come all the way out, but just enough to give you some room to pull this out on the next step. So we're just gonna kind of dig under there, get this loosened up. Before you start digging, know that I did miss a couple of clips. They blend in really well with that ceiling. You can see them here. They're right on the ceiling, two little concave areas. There are clips in there, so just carefully dig something under there, and if you can pull each of those out, it'll make the step a lot easier. See, so to me that didn't sound so good. So when I popped this piece out, it did sound like I broke something, but it was just those two little washer clips falling out of those top areas. Not a big deal at all, and I'll show you in a second what one of those looks like. I think it was maybe this. I just found that other piece on the floorboard. All right, this next part is going to be the trim here. So we're going to have to pull this switch panel out a little bit again. Thankfully, this panel is pretty easy to get some movement. And then this little piece of trim should just come right up. No problem. And then now that comes loose. All right, we're finally here at the center panel. And that's kind of what all this work has led up to, is being able to access this. So now that the trim's out of the way, we'll start pulling on this one. So you just saw me yanking on the panel, but there's a couple things we need to do before we fully take it apart. There is that cable, which is responsible for your four-wheel drive if you have it. And then there is this AC vent cable is being held up here. So we're gonna need to pull both of those out before we take the whole thing out. Ha. Guys, found that missing screw from earlier. Now we've got all four. See, sometimes things just have a way of working themselves out. Sorry, my camera fell a little bit, but there it is. That panel is done, and I think we're getting close. I know it feels like we've been removing trim for a long time, but that's because we have. I mean, that's a lot of this install. It's just such a form finish. Like, it takes over a lot of the OEM plastic and stuff, so you do have to remove a lot of trim. But the back half of this tutorial will be everything else. I mean, regarding software, setting up backup camera, all that. So looks like we're just about done with trim though for now. So my truck does have the four-wheel drive knob here. Some of you guys might not though, if you have the two-wheel drive model. But we are going to need to save that, and there's just little tabs holding it in, top and bottom. And so I'm just going to pinch those and get a little bit of flexibility, and then boom, just pops right out. So we are going to be reusing that. There is a spot cut out for it, and the same thing, it'll just insert, and we will plug that wire back in. So everything's going to be preserved. For the regular Tundra, though, if you don't have that four-wheel drive knob and your unit still has the cutout for it, they do have a volume knob, and I don't know if it's regularly included. I don't believe it is. I'll do a follow-up with them, and I'll put something in the description to let you know. But if you have the two-wheel drive model, I think there's a volume knob you can put in there. And truthfully, I wish that they had 2 holes in the new one. This is still the old panel, obviously. We're going to pull the new one up in a sec. But I wish that they had 2 holes in the new one for the volume and one for the four-wheel drive would be great. So here's the new trim piece, and I just wanted to show you guys my old button. Just slots right into there. Boom. And then I'll be able to shift gears with that. But they did send me this power knob, button, and volume. And so I really wish that there was another slot here or here. We'll see if we can find a way to make that happen. In the past installs that I've done for CarPlay, this seemed like a really hard step, but it's really not. In your C12 kit, you had 2 main power harnesses come with it, and only one of them is going to be necessary for the install, so you're not going to use the other one. And how you choose is just by looking at the white power connection heads coming off of your factory harness, and you need to find the harness that has connections for all of those. So whichever harness has the connections that properly fit without having to force anything, that's the one that you're going to use. So just take your time, kind of go through each one and count up the pins and match them up. You won't have to force them. They'll fit nice and easy. And once you do that, you'll be good to go for the next step. The USB. And that's going to go here. So I'm going to line up those two. It should click. Yep, nice and snug. Another quick thing to mention is that not all of the factory wires even get reused. The 2 that I just showed and this little harness were some of the ones that didn't get used at all. So now that we've got all of our factory plugs connected to that power harness, we're going to go ahead and plug in each of the plugs into the back of the C12. All right, so far I've only done 2 things. Plugged in power, and to the big connector, plugged in the canvas unit. Next thing I did was plug these 2 in. This one has a white tag that says GPS, and then this one has a black tag that says 4G. So at this part, I talked a little too long for my liking. So basically all I was saying is that I don't intend to use the GPS or the 4G function, but I went ahead and plugged them in anyways. And there are clever ways to route them so that they're sitting nice and flush and hidden away. But again, I'm not planning to use them, so I just plugged them in, and I'm going to tuck them in behind with the rest of the wires. All right, so I'm kind of going through everything, and I figured I'll actually just cover it in order. It is shown in the instruction manual, a diagram on how to do this, and you'll have that included with your unit. But I figured I'd go through it and just show you what I've got coming from where. So here's my main harness, and we'll just kind of go down the row. I already showed you guys 4G GPS. First row is a little 8-pin connector that's coming off the main harness. Second one is going to be your OEM USB harness, and that's going to go in this little 2-pin slot. Just push until it goes in securely, or you hear a little click. Next one is going to be our USB harness. There's going to be 2 of these. I'm going to go with the one that has 2 USB connections. It says USB 1 and USB 2. And then it is a, hard to focus, 6-pin. So that's going to get plugged in there. And you're going to run it behind this glove box section, behind the silver, up through the console and out through here. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and plug that into the 6-pin. Next up, I'm going to use this camera harness. And this is where I start to get worried that I'm plugging in the wrong things, but If this ends up being wrong, there'll be text on screen now telling you that it's wrong and that we'll correct it later. Okay, next up is going to be this 20-pin harness. Got a blue tip, all this stuff on it. And this harness has the same thing as the USB harnesses, where I'm going to run that little SIM tray cartridge through the glove box, and then it'll just hang out down there in case I need it someday. And then this connector is going to go ahead and plug in right here. Click. Not going to be plugging this in now, but I felt like it was a good time to mention it. There's a little 4-pin wire that's connected to the volume and power knob, and I have the 4-wheel drive Tundra, so the 4-wheel drive knob should be going in here, but I may have mentioned it previously. I was doing some work yesterday on this video, and may have mentioned it previously, but I actually was able to custom fit a stock piece of the Tundra to hold the 4-wheel shift knob on this element, which is going to stay underneath the C12. So I'm holding on to my 4-wheel drive shift knob, but then I'm also adding this volume and power knob that I ordered from CarTrimHome. So I'll be able to use the volume knob, which I really love. And so that's not going to get plugged in now, but that little 4-pin connector will get plugged into this spot here when it's time, when everything's, close to being assembled and stuff. All right, so I've got everything plugged in now. Just wanted to run over all the electronics and where they plugged in one more time, because I know that can be a part where many people can struggle. I did on my first couple installs, and so it's great to just have this as a reference. So let's just run through it in order. First is our 4G connection spot for that 4G antenna. Next is the GPS. Next is a little radio slot, and that is used for this plug-in that comes off that main power harness. And another thing that came off that main power harness is this little tiny connector, just a couple of wires for that first slot. And guys, all these things slot only into one place, so you can just look at the connector, the head, and the socket on the board, and if the pins line up, that's probably where it needs to be. But again, just for clarification, I'm running over what I did. This is a harness to protect or keep your stock USB slot working. So that's next in the row there. Beyond that is this little blue plug that's got the 2 wires that are going up and through the console, down underneath for those 2 extra USB connections. Past that, we've got this harness here, another blue connector for me, and it's got a couple of things on it. It's got camera power, cam VIN, that's a female RCA, yellow, and then a couple extra loose wires that I'm sure can be soldered to other things. I'm leaving all those terminated, but I am using the camera power to power that exclusive camera that they included for the front, and we will be mounting that in a second. I'll be routing it through the engine bay. But funny enough, you would think that since it's part of the same harness as the power, that I would connect the RCA cable from that camera to that same harness there, but I didn't. I booted up the car just to make sure everything was working and put it in reverse, and so this RCA, this female, is actually what gives you your backup camera. So I went ahead and plugged in this back video in. So I got the cam VIN connected with the back video in from the actual connector that I use to get up to my factory wires, because there are a couple extra back videos in, but this wire is connected to a different head that wasn't used. So obviously use the back video in wire from the white connector that connected to your factory wires. So this is going to be the live one for your backup camera, and for me it just worked where it should be connected to this harness. So this harness is powering the front camera and receiving signal for the backup camera. And so we'll move on to the next one, which is another blue connector, a little bit wider. And this one's got a couple of things on it. It's running, again, same thing, same path as the USBs, under here and to here. And that's that SIM tray. If you ever want to add a card and have data on this essentially Android tablet that's going to be in your car. And then it's got all kinds of RCA terminals and external mic. But for me, this terminal here, FCVBS in, that is the one where I plugged in the front camera. It has an RCA male, so that's where that goes. And when I booted up the car, I threw it into reverse, and then I went to the camera app and switched the camera, and sure enough, those are in the right places. So that's how I have my camera wiring set up. And then just to kind of speed through the rest of this, you know, your main harness has that black power, so make sure that's plugged in fully. You will hear a click when it's plugged in correctly. You've got a white male exit off of your main power adapter. That's going to be where your canvas unit is connected. So connect that there. And then, like I mentioned previously, our volume knob, which you might not be using if you're just going to stick with the four-wheel drive. It's definitely not like default required in any way. That's going to be plugged in here when we get there. And I think that's just about it for all the power. I mean, that's going to be both cameras and all the power. And I did start up the vehicle just a minute ago and it was working good. So that's the overview for that. Okay, so you may notice at this point that the screen is upside down, but I'm just going to start up the vehicle to show you guys that, and I'm going to flip the video so you guys can see what's going on the screen. But let's turn on just the battery. So boom, we're up and running. This is the quality from that camera. Really, really crispy quality. So I'm excited to get this installed for sure. I'm just gonna go ahead and set that camera down. That is our front camera though, that will be installed in the front here in a second. Right now I actually just want to test the reverse camera, make sure it's working okay. Yep, boom. So there's our factory camera. Looking good. One thing I do want to say about the factory backup camera is that it does not look very crispy on this screen. It's definitely usable and doesn't lag at all, but just you've got a nice fresh 1080p screen, and then if I'm not mistaken, the factory camera is something like 480p, so it just doesn't look very good. And I'm looking into options to replace that, so that'll be on the horizon for me. I think there's higher quality cameras that are printed under the same housing that you can just swap in for the factory camera, no problem. So that's going to be a future project for the Tundra. Another quick thing I wanted to mention was that I did go ahead and reconnect the battery in order to be able to power on the vehicle and test this. Had to make sure all the cameras were right and the wiring was right. And so when I first did that, you'll notice that one, the airbag is still disconnected over there, and two, the four-wheel drive shift knob is still disconnected. So when I first turned on the truck, obviously it is throwing codes and it's saying I have an airbag malfunction, and then the 4 low and 4 high are flashing. And to my knowledge, these things are normal, and this should correct itself when I plug that knob back in, and then we will need to go get that code cleared with an OBD2 scanner, which I don't have one, but I'm just gonna go to my local mechanic shop. All right, next step for me is going to be mounting this front camera. It came with plenty of wire, and so we're going to be routing this through the console, through the engine bay, and we're going to mount it, not exactly sure where. I'm thinking probably here or here. So we will get that mounted. I'm going to make a quick trip to the hardware store though, because I want to put some of that exterior wire tubing around it, and there's a Harbor Freight that's got some of that in stock just a few miles away, so I'm going to run and pick that up real quick. All right, so I just went to Harbor Freight, spent $4 on some of this 1/4 inch protective wire wrap. 14 feet of it should be good enough. I went ahead and installed that 1/4 inch protective plastic tubing around the camera wire, so that way it could just be protected in the engine bay from rain, weather, heat, stuff like that. All right, we've got the hood open, and that's because we're gonna be accessing the inside through the engine bay. Back there, see that gray grommet piece with those gray little spikes? We're gonna snip one of those and then run a cable through that. Quickly speeding through this part because I thought that snipping off the end of one of those spikes would leave a hole for running a cable through. Turns out they're solid, so we're gonna have to pierce it another way. And also my head is covering the shot half the time here anyways. All right, so I went and found myself a coat hanger. I guess we're gonna try to pierce it rather than cutting it. And so I've got just this bottom piece of coat hanger, snipped it off, and we're gonna try to push that through, and then we'll end up using that to feed our wire through too. So a couple of tips for getting this through the grommet area is that you don't want to pierce through the hole because it's not big enough to send that cable through. Another thing is you kind of want to make this J shape and crimp your wire in between there. That's the only way to hold onto the wire when you're piercing through the tiny little hole you're going to make. And if you're having a tough time getting through and making a hole, I actually did add a little tiny bit of heat to the end of my hanger, and that was just enough to send it through the grommet, and you'll see that here in a second. So it's just a little J hook like that. Then the key is really to do a good job on the taping. So really like put tons of electrical tape. Painter's tape was not working. It kept ripping on me. So pulled out the electrical tape, and you got to get like a clean little top point and wrap it really tightly. And then the cord's dangling right now, but I am going to wrap that just a little bit in order to keep it steady. Most of the weight will be kind of just from it going in like this, but I'm gonna wrap a little bit of tape around it, and then I'm gonna send it through. All right, so now that is officially going through there. It's a little hard to see, but you might be able to tell that I didn't go through the hole because the power connector is just a little too thick to make it through that hole. So I'm going just underneath it and feeding it through there. And then you'll see when we come over here that it popped out. So it's right there, and we're gonna pull that through. So we've got our vice grips here. We're gonna grip right onto that coat hanger. Lock down my freaking gas pedal, and then just pull right through. And if you did a clean enough job with the tape, it should come right through. So there's our power connector for in here, and that gets plugged in to the radio. So let me cut this tape off, and we'll have our cord ready to go. There we go. We got the pliers off of there, and we've got our cord coming up through the grommet right there. All right, so we've got the wire coming up from there, heading under all that up to the console. I actually used the same little trick with the door hanger, although this time I just used a little bit of tape and got it up there. So that will get plugged into from one of our other harnesses. This guy, remember the one that's got the power on it, and then this is the stock backup cam. Well, this is where the power comes out of. So those two will get plugged together. I just went ahead and turned on the truck for a second just to make sure that that camera's still working before we go ahead and route all the wires, and it's looking good. All right, so another little issue that I did not anticipate is that with the way that my grill is designed, it's not really a good place for this camera. If you set it there, the hood closes on top of it. If you try to do it how they intend for you to glue it to a ceiling, it doesn't fit there. You can do it there, but it's like super ugly and off the top. There's not enough traction for it to stick to something under here. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna Dremel out this bottom half from here to here, all of this part. Dremel it out, make it flat on the bottom, polish it up, clean it up, and then I'll mount it like this down, and hopefully it'll be kind of flush with the overall grill. So I'm gonna give that a try. All right, and so after some dremeling, this is what I've got. And it's still a little rough. I haven't cleaned it up yet, but just for the purposes of showing that the camera fits, that is what I'm going for right there. So it'll kind of blend in with the dash. I mean, it's still obvious that it's a camera, but it's a lot better than it totally sticking out. All right, so my next step is going to be to clean this out a little bit more with the proper polishing bits on the Dremel. Once I get that done and I'm satisfied with it, I'll go ahead and clean it with some soap and water and some alcohol, and then we'll stick the camera in. So that's about as clean as it's going to get. Polished it up. I know it doesn't look the smoothest, but that's as good as it's going to get for me. So went ahead and wiped it down with an alcohol pad. Stuck the sticky that comes included. It's just a little thin sticky gel pad on the bottom of the camera, and I'm going to go ahead and set it in there. And then here's the final product. Not the absolute best work, but for what I was given with this grill, I don't hate it. So I just stuck that on there, that little gel pad. I guess you got to leave it for 24 hours before you put any water, elements, or anything else on it. But look, I've got a little bit of tilt I can mess around with the camera. I'm just gonna have it pretty straight though. And there it is, incorporated into the grill now. Okay, so I've got my wire out right now just because I was working on plugging those back together. But essentially, the wire is going from the grommet immediately up and around back there, crossing through some of this. I have a zip tie there that I'm going to zip tie it to, coming behind this fuse box, around the battery, under this wire for the battery, up and around past the headlight area, and then in through that little hole there into this front section. And of course the back of the camera wiring is there. So that's it, that's the full route. So I'm gonna go test it out one more time, make sure it's still working, and then I'll electrical tape everything up and be done with this part. Yep, it's working good, although the console's upside down and the camera is right side up. So that means when I install it, it's gonna be upside down, so we'll have to fix that in the settings. Quick note, I looked in the settings and couldn't find a way to flip it. So I'm actually just peeled it up. I know I probably shouldn't do that because I'm gonna lose some of the stickiness of that pad. But I'm gonna take this apart and just literally flip that camera, and that should solve it. Yep, so 4 little screws takes that off. And then I'm just literally gonna pull that out and flip it. Flipped, now I'm gonna reassemble. All right, now that's reassembled, I've got a heat gun and I'm gonna heat that pad up and get it back into place. Okay, got it stuck back on there. Now let's go inside and see if it worked. Sure did. So now it's upside down, which means when we flip the radio and install it, it will be right side up. So think about that before you go install the camera like I did. That little module, it's just a plastic housing. Easily open it up and switch the orientation. If you're gonna mount it with the sticky pad on the bottom, you'll need to swap it because it's designed to be mounted from a ceiling point, from a top of something. So keep that in mind, and there you go. You learned how to avoid a mistake from watching this video.
We are now officially in the reassembly phase, so it had gotten dark the night before and I didn't record myself doing this, but I went ahead and added the C12 into its place, the black trim, the AC panel, and then finally that bottom panel with the USB and car charger outlets, and then my custom shift knob as well. Got all that installed. My only tips or advice here is to watch where your wires are. Make sure everything's tucked up and away properly so that you're not accidentally smashing any wires as you're forcefully pushing these into place. And then obviously that top area, the C12, has 4 bolts that we had taken out at the beginning. So you're going to need to put those back in. And then the black part has 2 bolts as well. And then just make sure you get everything plugged back in, same way that we unplugged it at the start. And you're good to go here in the middle. Most of the rest of this video is going to be sped up because all we're doing is reassembling things in the opposite order that we took them apart. So I'm getting my driver bottom section reassembled here, and then moving up we've got this small piece of trim, the vent panel. I had been missing some clips kind of throughout, so you saw me add one there to that left side switch panel. And then my dash unit up top was also missing one, so I reattached an extra there. But all we're doing here is pushing things back into place. All of this is bound by clips. So this small little trim piece, this whole switch panel, it's all just got to get pushed back into place. And it's just going to be more of the same on the passenger side. I'm reattaching starting with this piece of trim, and then I go grab the glove box and I'm starting to get that in place. But before I finish putting the screws in to reattach that.
All right, so one important step to note in between putting on this trim piece and the glove box is that if you did what I did and you left some USB wires and that SIM tray dangling like that, then you're gonna wanna tuck those up behind somewhere safe. I thought about making a hole into my glove box, but I really won't access them very often, if at all. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tuck them right behind this little plastic panel. And if I ever need them, I know they'll be there.
I put in the glove box off camera, but I wanted to show you the 5 screws. There is a black hex screw on the bottom right, and then there's a black screw on the bottom left, and the other 3 are inside the box. You've got 1 on the right and 2 on the left. And you do need those to keep it secure. It's very jiggly without them, so make sure you set those aside somewhere safe, and then you'll use those to reconnect as you're putting the glove box back in. You're looking at that yellow wire hanging down, and that's because our next step is putting the airbag back in. So this is a reminder to make sure your battery is disconnected. Anytime you're touching the airbag, especially while you're reconnecting it, you want to have that battery disconnected so you don't have an accidental fault or even a deployment. So I went ahead and disconnected the battery here, and now we're good to go to plug that airbag back in.
All right, I've had our battery disconnected for about 4 or 5 minutes now. So we're gonna go ahead and reinstall this airbag. Always super careful with this kind of stuff.
So go ahead and get that wire plugged back into the airbag. And then once you've got it plugged back in, push that black tab down to secure the wire in place.
Then once that's plugged in, we've got this little mount over here. Just sets that little clip into it. And then there are points where there's pins up on the top that are gonna hold that in. So we'll use those. There we go, got it that time. So it's sitting there nice and tidy. And then if you remember, we've got 3 screws with this hex pattern. I think it's a 10 mil, and those are gonna get screwed in. There's 1 on the right and 2 on the left. Okay, so this next big piece that goes around the airbag can be a little tricky. I would say, for some advice, there's 2 plastic mounting points that these hooks sit into. So just go ahead and set it in there and then find your other spots and click it into place. So let's give that a try. All right, so that one was definitely a tough piece to install. But yeah, like I said, as long as you make sure that those 2 bottom points get in their spots, and then you kind of hold it in place and get it into place as best you can, and then insert that bolt and that bolt. Those are really what tightens it up and holds it all together. And then there's a couple of clips here that just kind of fall into the lip of that airbag, and that keeps it all together. All right, we're getting down to the last little bit here. We got this piece on this side. Remember, it's got a little plastic bolt header right there. So we gotta make sure we get that positioned on that screw mount back there. And then it goes over the outside of this plastic curb. And there is a white plastic connector right there that does slide in properly. So as long as you push at the right angle, and I'm just gonna go ahead and screw on that little plastic bit. Okay, so for this part, these plastic white pieces should all still be in their places. If not, they've got little mounting hardware on the bottom. And all you're gonna do is match this up. So we've got a circle and a line clip. Those are gonna go there on the circle and the line. And then all these little risers are gonna fit right into place on those little plastic clips. So just kind of get under there, use your eyes, and fit it into place. We're gonna pop this trim piece back on. I'm missing one of the clips, so I went and grabbed one off of that old head unit that we had. Slip it on there. Do this with one hand, it's so easy. Set them all in line. Boom. Last but not least was this side piece, and it is similarly very easy. Can't forget to add my shift knob back. Boom.
So now that we're all done installing, I just wanted to go ahead and mention some extra stuff that didn't end up getting used during the install. There was a couple of plugs from the factory radio, some extra harnesses from the C12 kit, this anytime switch I didn't end up using, extra USB and some caps, pry tools of course, an extra camera I didn't use, and then of course the original radio.
All right, so it's nighttime now, but I wanted to go ahead and hop in here and show you guys exactly how you're gonna connect your phone to the system. And I've got an iPhone, so we're gonna be going through the iPhone steps. If you have an Android, it should be fairly similar. You're just gonna be using Android Auto, so that might require a couple extra things, but follow along, and this is how you're gonna connect your iPhone. Okay, so I've got my iPhone sitting here. I'm gonna have a screen recording off to the side showing you what I'm clicking there as I'm going along. And so it's very simple. You're not gonna be using settings at all, so don't go into the Bluetooth in there. You don't need to. All you're gonna be using is this app called CarLink 2.0. And I actually pinned it to the bottom corner over there because I know you're gonna be using that a lot as you connect to CarPlay throughout your time using this unit. So anyways, go here to the apps, tap on CarLink 2.0, and it's gonna say waiting for device to connect. So at this point, you're gonna wanna go on your phone and go under Bluetooth, and you should have your Bluetooth and your Wi-Fi on. And so go ahead and tap on Bluetooth and scroll down, and you're gonna see this device pop up, SYU_Android. So tap on that. We're gonna go ahead and pair, allow, that way you can ask it to make calls and things. And boom, it's really that simple. So we're connected now, and we no longer need the phone. So we are good to go. You've got your maps, you've got your phone, you've got everything you'd want on here. And you can talk to Siri and just use CarPlay like normal. So that's how you connect. Here's the final product. Everything's been installed, it all looks good. Nice clean panels and the big bright screen. So of course you're gonna have CarPlay automatically connects using an Android app called CarLink. And you've got this whole Android system you can play with. If you prefer to use the Android system, you can. It's really smooth, especially with this upgraded model. So that's why I went ahead and got that one. And you connect the car using this thing called CarLink. It's just a Bluetooth connection, and it should auto connect as soon as you tap on it. You go into your phone's Bluetooth settings, and as long as you have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on, it should appear. and connect right away. And if it doesn't, then you probably have a connector missing or something like that. An update on my little custom panel down here. The shift knob works great. I'll actually show that right now. Wheel out of the way. So we're gonna go ahead and shift into 4-wheel. And boom, we're in 4-wheel drive. We can go into 4-low, but that takes a second. It has to go to neutral, so I'm just gonna go ahead and put it back into 2. All right, perfect. So got that connected. This is a volume knob, and there's like an onboard song. There's a song preloaded onto here. It's not playing right now, but the volume knob just turns it on or off. And then you've got volume up and down. So those of you who don't have the shift knob can easily just get that in its place. But those of you who do have the shift knob, you won't have a volume knob because your shift knob will be there. So that's why I went ahead and made that custom panel. Definitely took some extra effort, but I love how it turned out. You've got this little picture of your Tundra. Very cool. Like, it is interactive. I just opened up the driver's side door and that pops open. And if you go into drive, it starts showing a little video of you actually driving down the road, which is very cool. Up here. And then we've also got our camera app. So that's that front camera. Incredible detail. I'll show you guys right now. Super crispy camera. So it's pretty unfortunate that the backup camera isn't as clean. That's because it's the stock camera. I still haven't messed with all the settings to get that car to go away. And then I believe that there's a wire you can disconnect on the physical camera itself to make the default stock blue Toyota lines go away. And you can customize to my knowledge, you can customize the lines for backing up. So that's what that backup camera looks like. And put it back in park. So we'll get out of this camera app. And so you've got CarPlay. That auto pops up as soon as you get into the vehicle and connect. But then you've also got this interactive thing if you just prefer to use this. And you've got a whole suite of apps here. One more thing I can show you is that when you're home, if you go to settings and factory, the code to get into the factory settings is 3368. And then you've got a whole bunch of settings you can mess with here. So if something's not working right, I mean, you can even like flip the reverse camera if that's not looking right. There's all kinds of stuff. So you can play around here in the settings. There's volume switching. If somehow your volume got flipped back and forth, you can flip that. And I found the screen to be like a little bright at nighttime, so I'm going to be adjusting the backlight current. I need to look it up, but there's a passcode to enter there, and it's not the same one, so I'll do that another time. But there's so many settings, so if there's something that's not working quite right, you can just mess around in there, and you'll probably find it. And that's it. That's the full install. So if you guys made it through, definitely let me know down in the comments how it went. If you guys have questions that pop up, I'm usually pretty active on social media, so I'll probably be able to answer. So leave your questions about the unit or about the install in the comments, and I'll try to help out. But other than that, you guys are good to go, and hope you enjoy your new C12 unit.